I'm Mike Goldman. I'm vice chair of the board of the WMATA in Washington, D.C. And I'll be giving you a presentation that will cover this afternoon, microtransit, but I'm also going to bring you up to date on what's been happening more generally at WMATA in the era of COVID. I wish I could be joining you in Boston as we had originally planned to do, since I have fond memories of spending 3 years there as a student many, many years ago, taking the T from Logan Airport to Harvard Square in Cambridge, to Roxbury, and of course to Fenway Park for a good Red Sox game from time to time. I'm coming to you from a different location, just as Mike Ogborn is coming to you from Denver. I'm coming to you from Rehoboth Beach in Delaware along the US Atlantic coast. For those of you who are on the other side of the pond and not familiar with our beautiful Atlantic beaches, for those of you who are farther to the west, Rehoboth Beach may become very familiar to you over the next year as the summer White House, if Vice President Biden is successful and elected as president in the US November elections, as he maintains a summer home here. And as you can see from the first screen, I'll be giving you a little background on WMATA, and then I'll be talking about our bus transformation efforts, which have become much more important in the era of COVID. Some of the things we're doing, working with TNCs, Uber and Lyft, and Microtransit pilot that's in the area. So a little bit about WMATA. We are a very large system, just as the T General Manager described it in an earlier session today. We serve a population of 4 million with 1 million trips in the pre-COVID environment by bus and rail. So the rail is the third largest system in the country with 91 stations and over 1,100 rail cars. And there you can see the famous map that we have there. Before COVID, our hours were to about 11:30 Monday through Thursday and 1 o'clock on weekends. Metro Bus is actually would be about standing alone about the sixth biggest network with a bus fleet of 1,600 buses. You see some of our drivers there as well. And finally, as all US systems do, we also run a paratransit system, Metro Access, which also carries 2 million passengers annually, and we operate 725 vans. We have a total budget of 3.6 billion, operating budget of 2 billion, with a capital budget of 1.6 billion. As you can see, we receive 815 million, roughly 40%, from passengers and other fees, and the other 1.2 billion of the operating budget is in the form of subsidies from our operating jurisdictions. And as with most US systems, 70% of our operating costs represent transit personnel. As you can see here, the three main jurisdictions in the Washington area all make contributions. District of Columbia and the state of Maryland, and in Virginia, a number of the local jurisdictions make that contribution: Arlington, Alexandria, and the city of Fairfax, and soon to be another county, Loudoun. And the percentage shares are based on the number of stations, route miles, and passenger counts in the jurisdiction. And so before moving on to the bus transformation project, let me just tell you what the impact of COVID has been. Essentially, from the middle of March on, our ridership was down about 90% from pre-COVID levels. It was probably a little higher initially for rail and a little lower for bus. So that bus has been down about 75, 80% as opposed to 90, 95% for rail. The result has been that through most of the summers, we've actually carried more passengers, more riders on bus than on rail, about a little over 100,000 on bus per day versus about 50 to 60,000 on rail. And we found, as you would expect, that most of the bus passengers are representatives of our poor and minority community, and they reflect many of the essential workers in hospitals, grocery stores, and the like, so that Metro Bus has essentially become an essential facility uh, for our bus passengers during this period. We've recently ramped up uh, Metro Rail and Metro Bus this month in the expectation that there would be a resurgence of ridership in the fall. However, because of the spreading nationwide infection rates from June or July, as well as the instructions that education will be online for most of our local systems, most employers have advised their employees to stay home at least to the end of the year. We expect that we'll now be making a transition back to a much lower level of service, cutting services and fares, because we anticipate that by the end of December, January, the Federal CARES Act money, which has been keeping us afloat, will run out, and we will have a very significant deficit we will have to make up for the 6 months of first 6 months of 2021. So while we're currently operating close to pre-COVID levels, we expect that by December, January, we will have to make some significant reductions in order to keep a balanced budget as our transit authority and our compact requires of us. So bus transformation project was initiated because, like most US systems, we've experienced a very significant decline in bus ridership over the past decade. As you see from this slide, it's been down and off 13% since 2012. And so we face core challenges needed to meet customer needs and changing technology that's out there these days. So we assembled a project team that includes both WMATA leadership as well as an executive steering committee that includes regional leaders as well as transit experts. And they spent about a year and a half developing this bus transformation studies. And, the main recommendations of it are not really surprising when you really think about it. It's a need to achieve frequent and convenient bus service, get bus priority on roadways, because in that period when ridership has declined, the length of time a bus would have to go on a bus route has also lengthened due to increased congestion. We'd like to increase the customer experience through use of a mobile app. As I said, more efficient, more faster service, as well as Wi-Fi on the buses. And so, just a deep dive into some of these issues in terms of providing frequent and convenient bus service. We're going to try to establish regional standards across the various jurisdictions, because bus service in this area is provided not just by WMATA through Metrobus, but through a number of regional bus systems that are maintained by the counties in the surrounding area, Montgomery and Prince George's County in Maryland, and Arlington, Alexandria, and Fairfax County in Virginia. I think a big part of our effort here will be item C, a restructuring of the bus network. Many of the routes that Metrobus operates haven't changed in 50 years. In fact, many of our numbered bus routes still reflect the old streetcar routes that existed in Washington when it was operated by something called DC Transit before WMATA took over bus operations in the mid 1950s. Priority on the roadways and developing BRT, bus rapid transit, is a big part of the effort here as well. There's already been some bus transit way projects that I'll be talking about in Maryland a little later on. And DC has been in the forefront of establishing bus-only lanes on a number of major routes throughout the District of Columbia. And so, as I said before, part of the customer experience will be Wi-Fi use of mobile app to make it easier for people to ride on the bus systems. And so earlier in this year, before COVID, the board took the bus transformation project and came up with its own set of priorities based on what the project team had come back with. And these 6 bullets represent the major bus priorities: restructure Metrobus routes, bus-only lanes, and more BRT, free transfers between Metrobus and Metrorail and local bus operators. There's a discount now, but essentially it is not a free transfer as you have in many systems in the US. A mobile app solution. We're also going to move bus to evaluate the potential for a totally zero emission electric bus fleet and to develop a regional bus pass. And this slide just shows some of the experiments and pilots going on in the region. 2 that I'm going to talk about this afternoon include the BRT in Montgomery County and the flexible micro transit project that also goes on in Montgomery County. It's the area which I come from and represent on the WMATA board, so I'm familiar with these projects. But as you can see, there's a number of microtransit and other projects, BRT, going on throughout the Washington, D.C. region. So the bus rapid transit project going on in Montgomery County is called FLASH. Fascinating new name for this project. As you can see, it's a limited station operation, very similar to a light rail project in terms of stations where riders will board, where riders will get and pay for their bus transport at that point in the process. The bus design features accordion-shaped buses, which will have low entry at street level, no climbing a lot of steps. There's another shot of the bus. Actually, they've adopted a very colorful design for the Flash buses as well. The initial route will go up and down Route 29, which is the major thoroughfare that connects the Washington, D.C. area with Baltimore in the north of Howard County there. Construction is well underway, and while this slide indicates it was supposed to start in spring 2020, that of course has been delayed and pushed back by 6 or 12 months by COVID. The Flash BRT will serve both local riders along this Route 29 corridor, as well as it will connect with Metrorail at the Silver Spring Transit Center, shown at the bottom right on the Maryland District line, which is one of the main stations for our red line, and also a intersection point, a connection point for that little dotted line which runs through Silver Spring, which is the Purple Line, which is being built by the state of Maryland and is one of the big P3 projects in the nation right now. So it's a total of 14 miles. Service will be 7 days a week. Service will be available every 7.5 minutes in peak and 15 minutes off peak. And as you can see, there's a total of 11 stations on the route. The forecast will be about 20,000 daily riders in 20 years' time, 2040, and expected to save travel time along that corridor of about 30%. Now, WMATA has also reached out and has been working with the TNCs, Uber, and Lyft in 2 different kinds of projects. We've first had an RFP out that went live earlier this year for an after-hours commuter service program to handle the kind of late-night workers, hospital workers, between the hours of midnight and 4 p.m. And this is because of our closing time of 11:30 midnight during the week, and midnight on weekends, although we were planning to expand it to 1 p.m. In any case, the subsidy, as you can see, started out as about $3. Because of COVID, we've expanded that subsidy level to $6. And as you can see, we've already, at least at this time, this is from February, had 360 registered customers and already 5,000 trips taken when the project just started. Customers qualify based on verification of their work hours with their employers, and the subsidy is paid directly to Lyft to keep the program going. At the same time, we've had for the past 3 years what we call an Abilities Ride program, which is part of our program that works with Metro Access to handle the disabled, but Abilities Ride is a program directed at the ambulatory disabled, so that instead of waiting for a Metro Access van, we've essentially contracted with initially with 2 taxi cab companies in the Maryland suburbs. And we find that this is more convenient for users than having to wait for a van and be one passenger on a van that may be carrying 4 or 5. And for WMATA, it's very cost effective because the cost for the taxi is about $25 versus a cost of about $50 per ride on our vans. We had a recent solicitation out there, and we've now added 3 TNC companies to the list of providers, Uber, Via, and Curb. And we're looking forward to adding more. It's a fairly open RFP, so that providers can sign on anytime they feel the need or the ability. And the number of trips, as you see, has expanded very rapidly, moving from 1,600 originally to about, we forecast about 30,000 by January of 2024. Now, we also in Montgomery County have had a microtransit pilot, which I'll talk about for a minute or two here. It's called Flex. It features no scheduled stops or schedules. It's operated by the Montgomery County Department of Transit. And this is it features these little vans that are operating out of 2 zones. Both are zones along our red line, heavy rail line. One, a Wheaton zone, which is one stop, and the other is a Rockville zone. And the service operates from 6 to 9 a.m. and 3 to 7. You just call up, and service was launched in June 26, 2019. So it's been in play for a little over a year. Look at this. We get a lot of stuff here that I didn't know. I thought we would just have one slide, but instead we get a lot of information in bullet points. Okay. And I had one other slide that was going to tell you, there it is, a little mode. People use the system by downloading a Ride-On Flex app. Ride-On is the county's transit system. You enter your pickup and drop off location within the zone, and then you go to the pickoff location. That's sent to you by text, and you ride from there. It's been fairly successful, and there's similar microtransit experiments going on in other parts of our area, Prince George's County, and in Virginia as well. So that's about it. I hope I've told you a little bit about WMATA, told you a little bit other things that are going on, as well as a little bit about microtransit. So if I know how to do this correctly, I will hit the stop sharing button. I don't know if I've given you back, Mike.
Yes, I'm on again. Thank you, Mike. We do have one question that has come up, and that is, what was the investment for the 14-mile service that you discussed?
I don't know if I have that number. This is the flash service, the BRT. And I'm just trying to go back and see if we had that in the presentation. Yeah. Yeah, the project cost is 40 million for the 14 miles, which works out to 3 million per mile, and it benefited from a 10 million federal Tiger grant. If that's responsive to that inquiry.
I believe it was, because they just wanted to know what funds you had to invest in that 14 miles. What is the status of the electrification of the buses in the system?
We now at WMATA have, I think, 2 or 3 buses on a federal grant that are being used for trial runs on different routes throughout the system. And I think it'll take another 12 months, at least that was the pre-COVID estimate, to evaluate the use of electric buses. And then we will take up a procurement for electric bus. I think one of the interesting parts of the electrification, which I assume Denver is already experiencing somewhat ahead of us, is the large infrastructure costs required, not just in buses, but in power generation and the sites for recharging the buses and how that will work in your system. So those are things that we hope we're going to get a better handle on during this pilot period.
And once this testing is over with, how soon do you think you'll have more buses in service under electrification or battery operated?
Before COVID, I would have told you that would probably be in 3 to 5 years. I think we all have to now look at our capital budgets and decide what can be done in the short term as opposed to what will take a little longer to implement. There is not just, as you're probably familiar, the electric buses are a little more expensive than the diesel or CNG buses. And as I mentioned, there's a good deal of infrastructure that has to be added to the system. And we're, of course, currently we replace our bus fleet sort of about 100 buses a year, so that we go through a full bus fleet renewal every 10 years. So I suspect we will eventually try and work electric buses into that kind of a system where we're taking them on at the rate of about 100 a year over a 10-year period to completely electrify the system.
And is WMATA looking at any other technology for fueling buses, like hydrogen power or anything of that nature?
No, what we're looking at is the electrification and all electric buses as the goal right now.
It's a pretty big goal, so.
It is. Yeah. And with with 1,000 buses, 1,100 buses right now, it's not an easy goal to reach in a very short period of time.